Well, good morning, everybody. I am so excited to be back. I feel like I've been gone forever, and most of you are probably thinking, not even really sure what she's talking about. This is Angie with Producers XL, and you're listening to my podcast, which is basically the long term. Just different things that kind of approach anything around extended care planning. So I'll be a little far reaching this year. I know I've said that every podcast. I'm going to kind of bring some different ideas to you. But first and foremost, we just um, came off of Memorial Day yesterday. And I do want to give a very sincere shout out to the fact that we want to acknowledge Memorial Day and its meaning. And it's not about the barbecue. It's not about the going to the lake. It's not about the kickoff to summer, although that's how most of us earmark it. So I want to give a very sincere shout out to Memorial Day. The very first one was May 30th in 1868. And it's all about those that gave everything, gave their all for the service of this country. So I wanted to take a moment and acknowledge that and hope you all had a very nice weekend memorializing anybody that might have served in your family. So thank you for that. With that, I want to talk to you today. So it was last month, which for me, I feel like I've been gone for a couple of weeks on some agent meeting trips. And I went to a Medicare conference and was able to get on main stage and not talk about Medicare because it was a Medicare conference. And I was not attending that conference with the delusion that I was going to go find a bunch of agents writing Medicare that wanted to do business with us, albeit I think everybody would love to do business with me, but I understand that relationships, and I love when people are dedicated to their FMOs or their MGAs or BGAs or whatever you call us out there, because loyalty means a lot. But what I thought was very interesting is when you think about Medicare and what it covers, it does broach into extended care planning, right? Because we've all talked about this. Long-term care, extended care needs are not covered by Medicare. Flip to your Medicare and You book that comes out every single year, and there's a couple of different pages inside that says, long-term care is not covered by Medicare. It does not cover custodial care, and it goes on and on and on about that. And so my idea at this Medicare conference, maybe in the complete dork that I am, wanted to get up. You got to appreciate this. It's about a 2.5-day conference. So I'm up against the last day of the conference. It's in Las Vegas. So I've already got 2 strikes against me. And I am the very last presenter at like 3:00 in the afternoon on the last day. So 3 strikes. I mean, I'm already thinking to myself, how in the world am I going to captivate this audience? When there was probably 100 people still there that hadn't already skirted out early from the conference. And I thought, how in the world am I going to make this dynamic enough to keep their attentions? And it made me say to myself, you know what, Angie, you probably ought to bring this to your podcast because it was incredibly well received. So my introduction to this is, have you ever thought about, and then of course I didn't want to give it away, but I'm going to talk to you today about short-term care. And my whole presentation was go for the yes. So if any of you have sold long-term care insurance, I don't care if it's on a life insurance, if it's a chronic illness rider, if it's a critical illness rider, it's an accelerated death benefit, or if it's traditional or annuity with LTC rider, whatever it is, going into the conversation that it's going to be a little bit of a challenge. Even those people that have had the experience in their own family, it's sometimes a difficult conversation to have because it's really hard for us, namely our clients, to see themselves at that point in their life, even if they've helped their own parents through that, right? It's not going to happen to me. Not going to happen to me. So my whole idea behind this presentation was go for the yes. Start the conversation around extended care planning with something that's very tangible, that from a pricing perspective, from a triggering benefits, from all the little extras that it has inside of it, go for the yes. It could pivot you into a long-term care conversation. So I also did a presentation a long time ago called Selling Long-Term Care Insurance in Reverse. It's the same idea. It's all around short-term care. So the idea that I gave them was, look, short-term care, when you're talking about it, and this is where I found a lot of confusion. So when we started bringing short-term care to the masses, and the way it was described, they were like, oh, okay, so it's long-term care, but just for a shorter period of time. By definition, no. But the problem is it walks like a duck, it quacks like a duck, but it's not a duck. Because that 90-day certification need of care is not in there. That's a good thing. So it's you kind of got to wrap your mind around it. So at my meeting, I stepped back and I said, I just want to share with you a little bit of my long-term care nerd, the nerd side of me. And you guys will all of you know this, right? So a short-term care product is an indemnity-based policy. Indemnity. You have a service and you get the benefit, just like indemnity-based long-term care, which we don't really have those anymore. But when you do a life insurance policy with a long-term care or chronic illness rider, those can be paid as indemnity, right? So you get what you bought, not what your cost of care is. Whether it's lower or higher than your benefit, you're getting that benefit amount that you bought. There's no partnership training involved with short-term care. You're not going through annual or every 2 years long-term care partnership certification because it's not long-term care. A short-term care policy never pays more than 360 days. What does long-term care pay? 365 days or more, 90-day expectation need of care, 2 out of 6 activities of daily living, or a severe cognitive impairment. The triggers on a short-term care are exactly the same. 2 out of 6 activities of daily living or a severe cognitive impairment, but no 90-day certification need of care, and will not pay more than 360 days of care, of service. So to say it's a 1-year policy is not accurate. And it's not accurate because it doesn't pay 365. It's not accurate because think about a hospital indemnity plan. It basically says you usually buy a 3 or a 6 day benefit and you buy $100, $200, $300 a day that says when you're hospitalized, inpatient hospitalized, for every day you're there, we'll pay you. If you bought $100 a day, we're going to give you $100 for that day that you're in the hospital. Paid directly to you, policyholder, to be indemnified for being in the hospital. Short-term care is the same thing. It's just very scheduled, right? So you're receiving home health care. Some of them are even going to pay assisted living care. Some of them will even pay skilled nursing care, still meeting the 2 out of 6 ADLs, but no 90-day certification need for care. Because remember, short duration. However, if you're receiving home health care, and we do have one little policy, Kansas, you guys know I'm based out of Kansas. They're not very friendly to short-term care. I mean, we don't have a lot of choices out here. So I think you got in Kansas, you got GTL, which is Guaranteed Trust Life, and Bankers Life. And unless you're a Bankers Life agent, you're not selling the Bankers Life policy. So you got one in Kansas. Cigna just launched a new one. You've got Aetna as well. And there's some other companies out there that are doing short-term care as well. They're all worth a look, because what I find is when you're sitting down with a client, how do you roll into this conversation? So we do a lot of Medicare business. We help a lot of agents. We've got Medicare universities. We're helping you. This contract, this little short-term care, whether it be with, one that covers skilled nursing or an assisted living or home health care, the reason I say it's scheduled in benefit, because most of them will say if you're receiving home health care and you need skilled services in your home. So what does skilled mean? That person has a degree behind their name. RN, CNA, CMA, physical therapist, occupational therapist, chemotherapy. Very skilled in nature, right? Somebody with a degree behind their name is providing those services to you. But when you need those services in your home, So when you think about the conversation to a Medicare client, Medicare covers, Part A covers this, Part B covers this, Part D covers this, Part C covers this. You've got your add-ons in Part C, how all of that works together, but never touches extended care. And back in the day, when we were doing these presentations, everybody said, yeah, but we buy a 90-day elimination on our long-term care policy because Medicare will pay the first 100 days with no cost out of pocket. Well, okay, but nobody's buying Plan F anymore. Everybody's Plan G, so there's a deductible on your Part B, and I hope I'm not losing too many of you on all of these little letters in the alphabet soup we got going on. But there's nobody, when you're talking about Medicare and it's their health insurance, when they decide to come off of group or off their individual and age in, that doesn't have to be age 65. Most people are working beyond that. So whether their group is over 20 or under 20 and what other circumstances, can they delay their Part B? Do they go into A, delay all of that stuff? Nobody can negate the fact that Medicare, that platform, is going to cover their medical costs, right? Everybody, you can't talk to a single person that can't say at some point in their life they're going to have physical therapy, because that's what we do, right? You go in, you have a surgery, and everybody's clamoring to say, when am I going home? How quickly can I get out of here? I don't want to be in the hospital. So then what they do is you immediately go to physical therapy. And we all know with health insurance under age 65, because these plans will issue under age 65, nobody wants to be in the hospital. So they dismiss you from the hospital and then send you straight to physical therapy to rehabilitate so that you can get that range of motion, you can get the mobility back, occupational therapy, you can get those large motor skills, put your shoes on. So I think of a lot of that around strokes and things, but it's way more than that. There's a lot of traumas that can occur that you can recover from, but you're going to need some help getting all of those skills and getting your strength with physical therapy. So there's really nobody that you're going to talk to that at someday in their mind, logically, couldn't say, well, yeah, I'm sure I'm going to need physical therapy at some point in my life. I've already went and had a knee scope and had to go through 6 weeks of physical therapy 3 times a day or 3 times a week. They can see that. So the idea is go for the yes, get them to see how these little short-term care policies play in, and then here's your pivot. Mr. and Mrs. Jones, can I ask you, has anybody in your family ever needed extended care? Well, what do you mean by extended care? Well, have they ever needed more than just short-term rehabilitation? Has anybody needed longer skilled care? Anyone received home health care or been in an assisted living? Oh, yeah. My Aunt Sue, she was in for 18 months. My Aunt Connie needed some rehab, whatever the case. And then just listen to their stories. Their stories are going to help you decide, is this prospect, is my client someone that I should transition from? Hey, I've got this policy that will pay for a shorter duration. Or what about if the short-term care policy is going to cover you for 360 days? So if you want to think of that as a 1-year policy, that's fine. It can actually last longer than that, because if you're not receiving a service every single day of the week, right, then it's going to last longer, just like a reimbursement long-term care policy. So if they say, yes, I have had someone need extended care, then you say, well, I do actually have some solutions where I can jump from a 1 to a 2-year. All you've done is now taken them from a short-term care to a long-term care. Now, we used to have a long-term care policy that would pay 1 year. Way back in the day, if you think way back, Transamerica actually had a 365-day, 1-year long-term care policy. Kind of wish I had something like that back. You know what? Now that I think about it, I actually say that a lot these days. There's a lot of things that we had back in the day that I wish we had today, because I really think we would see a lot of sales that way. Just in some of the unique policy designs that were way too far ahead of their time, that all of us little purists in mind of long-term care strategies couldn't get out of our own way and think outside the box. Well, Pension Protection Act threw us up against a wall and said, look, you're going to think a little differently. So introducing life insurance and annuities with long-term care riders, I think if you haven't incorporated short-term care into your product portfolio and the solutions for your clients, I think you're missing a huge amount of opportunity there, because people can see the need. Oh, yeah, I can see where I would need physical therapy. I want to give you two very specific examples. Neither one of these clients, had short-term care. Neither one of these clients had long-term care. So I had an uncle that was having some very, very, very serious heart concerns, was in the hospital. It was during COVID. Nobody could go see. Me and my aunts all stood outside the hospital with a sign the day before he went into surgery. It's one of those that you just don't know if his heart's going to be strong enough to withstand those types of things. Well, he did. He successfully went through the surgery. After a long, long stint in the hospital, sent him home and said, we want your cardiac rehab to be done in your home. We don't want you coming back to the hospital where you could actually catch something. I don't know if you know this, but there are a lot of cooties that run around hospitals. People don't go to the hospital because they're healthy. So stay home, Uncle Dennis. We'll take cardiac rehab to you. While he was there, he couldn't dress himself. He couldn't feed himself. He was having a hard time transferring, right? So everybody should be saying to themselves, bing, 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 bing. Where's that long-term care? Because he went through longer than 3 months, 90 days of getting himself back to being able to perform his ADLs. This short-term care policy, if he would have had one, would have actually paid. Now, keep in mind, he was on Medicare at the time. Medicare's paying for all of this, paying for the cardiac rehab in home. His doctor wrote out the script. He's homebound. We approved the therapies, all of those types of things. This policy would have put additional dollars in his pocket. So follow me on this idea. Medicare's paying for all the medical bills. He could have collected $75, $150, $200, $400, depending on how many services he would have needed, somebody to come in and bathe and dress and toilet or whatever the case is. He could have been collecting money on an indemnity style short-term care plan that would have put that money back in his pocket, so that if at some point in time his wife needed even more extensive care and Medicare wasn't going to pay for it because he became chronically ill, and now Medicare is going to tap out at some point, she would have money in their account to be able to pay for possibly skilled nursing if he had to go to the nursing home. Now, luckily, he's still at home. He's still, recovered, living, as good as he gets, as I air quote this. I have another example. This one happens to be my mother-in-law. I seem to use her a lot in my examples. Just celebrated her birthday yesterday, 73 years old. During COVID, she also went through a bout where they called it COVID deconditioning. I don't know if you all remember, I had a home health administrator on my podcast a long time ago, and she said COVID is really doing a number with all of this deconditioning, because we've got seniors ending up with a lot of mobility issues because they're just sitting in their house. They're not being active. So their circulation, their mobility, all kinds of wound care became really, really big because they had pressure ulcers, all kinds of stuff. We ended up having to hire a private duty nurse. Remember, no short-term care insurance, no long-term care insurance. You had to hire a private duty nurse to come in twice a day for an hour a day to get her up, get her showered, get her dressed, make sure she's eating her breakfast and taking her morning meds, get her in her chair, and then we would all take turns going over and making sure that, afternoon pills were taken. How are we doing? Do we need any, assistance? And then she would come back later in the afternoon to make sure that she was, nothing bad had happened while she was there. Again, could have collected. So I want to talk about this a little bit. About everyone's probably thinking to themselves, yeah, that's great. That sounds real nice, Angie. Yeah, I could see where it could be utilized. But let me tell you how much money that you could actually put back in a family's pocket to be used, earmarked at a later date. If somebody had an example of a policy that covered nursing home, assisted living, home health care, they were 65 years old and they bought a policy that would pay $300 a day for 360 days of care with a 20-day elimination, no inflation, right? The benefit's not going to grow. It's just $300. The premium on that's about $190 a month. If they were to collect all of those benefits, they could put $108,000 back in that family's checkbook. Well, cost of care for 1 year in a skilled nursing home is at or well exceeding $100,000. That could be very, very beneficial to a family in a very, very high time of need. What about that little home health care policy that only pays for home health care? It covers skilled, non-skilled benefits, as well as some prescription benefits, not replacing the Part D drug plan, but also adding some extra dollars in there. And I didn't factor that in. I basically said if they had a home health care only policy, bought it at age 65, this one would, and they bought the biggest benefit of $450 a day, same 360 days. This one has no elimination on it, no inflation. Premium for that is around $73 a month. Now it's age banded. So when you jump into the next age band, the premium does go up. So think about when people start saying, well, what about rate increases? They're kind of already building those in, right? So every age bracket you jump into, you're paying a little bit more premium. But under that plan, that family could have put $162,000 back in their checkbook to be earmarked and used at a later date. I find that these short-term care policies are incredibly viable to families when you start talking to them. And for whatever reason, people are more comfortable talking about someone helping them rehabilitate than how do we pay for care when you can no longer take care of yourself and your family can't take care of you? How do we cover that cost, which is basically nursing home, assisted living? Nobody wants to talk about that, but they're more than happy to talk about, hey, what if we could actually put additional dollars to the tune of either 108 or 162 or however you build the policy? Put that back in your pocket, even if Medicare is already paying for the medical services, and earmark this for a later date if you need it. Very viable. So let's talk about the underwriting on this. They're underwritten like a Medicare supplement. So think about when you're rewriting someone on a Medicare supplement application, or I can't say a Medicare Advantage, right? Because they have open enrollment every year. They've got AEP where they can move plan to plan. So med subs, once you're in them, right, you have to, if it's not your guaranteed issue right or your open enrollment right, know your state, because sometimes they can guarantee issue move every anniversary, every annual. But those that are going to be medically underwritten, they're going to answer basically the same questions. Now, that little standalone home health care policy, really no health questions. Basically, do you need help with your ADLs? Do you have a cognitive impairment? Do you have HIV? Do you plan on going into the hospital or nursing home within the next 60 days? So not guaranteed issue, but incredibly simplified. The other ones that include nursing home and assisted living and home health care, more underwritten like a Medicare. So again, back to your Medicare clients. You're talking with them. You're more than likely helping them with their prescription drug benefit, whether you're going out to Medicare.gov and getting them enrolled via that because you don't want to jump through the AHIP certification, the liability and all of that. You know their medications. If you know their medications, you know their health. Regardless of what they take it for, you know their health. And I don't know if you've noticed, but when you talk to people about their drug plans or just their medicals at all, for whatever reason, people like to talk about themselves, their health. And I don't know if you've noticed, but sometimes when you get around certain groups of seniors, it basically becomes, I'm going to one up you with what I just got. And now I'm taking this. And did you know about that? I have to tell you, I was sitting in an airport next to two couples, and they were all talking about going on to Medicare. And it was hilarious because they were like, yeah, have you taken that cognitive exam? That thing is so stupid. That is ridiculous. They don't even really ask you anything. How can they even do this? You know, when they were talking about the questions that they had to be asked and things. And all I could think to myself is those tests are very specifically designed to catch short-term memory. Of course, if you have no concerns, they probably would seem silly. But I thought, bite your tongue, Angie, because the next thing I know, they'd be asking me questions about all kinds of things. So kind of humorous. The one other thing I want to leave with you about short-term care, it pays commissions like long-term care. So it will pay you a renewal as long as the people keep the coverage. So these are not only great viable products for your clients, but they're great viable products for your book of business with a renewable income stream. Now, premiums are a little bit lower. You heard me rattle off a couple of them, but you know what? Some of them will pivot and want to buy a longer benefit period, which means they're now going from short-term to long-term care. Others may be just very, very happy. Know that not all short-term care. So when we think about long-term care policies, right, they're kind of standardized. NAIC set guidelines, 90-day trigger, 90-day expectation need of care, has to offer non-forfeiture, must offer inflation, there's a lot of consumer protections built around long-term care. Not all short-term care policies act the same. They're all a little bit different. So if at some point you would ever want to say, Angie, this is the one that I sell, this is the one that I like, do you have it? Do you like it? I will tell you, not all of them carry high ratings either, right? So some of them can be B-rated companies selling these products, others are A-rated. So we have a tendency to lean to those carriers that are A-rated companies. That doesn't necessarily mean the B-rated companies are bad. You, just like everything else, you need to know what you're selling, how it works, and the stability and strength, financial strength of that carrier. So I think that even though this one's not around long-term care planning, I really fully believe that short-term care is very, very viable for your book of business. If any of you would like to carry on an additional conversation with me on, Angie, I listen to your podcast and I can think of 10 different clients that I probably ought to bring this up to. Do you have any marketing pieces for that? The answer is yes, of course. Some of them are really easy. I can customize them for you. So I want to leave with you this month, and I'm very, very excited to be back with all of you. And I'll try to think of something exciting that I'm going to do for next month's. But short-term care was kind of a hot topic for me. It went over so well at the Medicare conference. I absolutely had to share it with you. I thank all of you for joining me today, and I look forward to having another podcast next month, the last Tuesday of every month. And thank you, and you all have a great day.